important discussion. First off, we have Mr. Walid Badawi, the resident representative of the United Nations Development Programme. Mr. Walid was appointed as the resident representative of the United Nations Development Programme in Kenya with effect from 4th of June 2010. Mr. Badawi has vast experience in UNDP with 26 years of progressive, complex international development and leadership experience. Until his appointment, Mr. Badawi served as the United Nations resident representative and interim for UNDP South Africa, and prior to that, UNDP country director, South Africa from 2014 to 2019. Well, that's a quick look at our first guest. Let's move to our second guest, who will be a familiar face you have seen on our channels, and he is the man to also help us unpack this very important subject. We have the privilege of hosting Dr. Chris Kipto, the Principal Secretary from the Ministry of Environment and Forestry. Well, he was reassigned to the ministry by His Excellency the President Uhuru Kenyatta in January 2020. Prior to this assignment, Dr. Kipto was the immediate Principal Secretary, State Department for Trade in the Ministry of Industry, Trade and Cooperatives. He held the docket since December 2015. Before his appointment into government, Dr. Kipto worked for 3 years at Trademark East Africa as the country director. Well, ladies and gentlemen, that is this very important set of guests that we have on the program. Well, to get the ball rolling, let's first take a look at this following report. Plans by the government to plant 2 billion trees by 2022 to enhance the country's forest cover and reclaim 5.1 million hectares of land is fast gaining momentum. According to Environment Principal Secretary Dr. Chris Kipto, efforts are in top gear to actualize this.
So we want to support nursery development and through private sector engagement.
The government had hoped to plant 500 million trees this year and 700 million trees in 2021, while 800 million trees were earmarked for 2022. But the challenge has been availability of seedlings. Well, that report ushers us into a discussion at this point in time, and I'd like to get the discussion on the road. Let me bring in Mr. Badawi, the resident from UNDP representative, to just give us his opening remarks in terms of where are we when it comes to environmental issues around the tree forest cover in the country.
Thank you, Mr. Abiy, for first of all having me on your program. And actually, let me start off by appreciating Standard Media Group, because we've signed as UNDP recently a partnership MOU that promised to actually bring a lot of these development issues to the public, and leveraging UNDP's knowledge on different development issues, to engage in discussions such as this. So really thank you for hosting me and for allowing us both to deliver on our joint commitment to do just that. Let me maybe start to contextualize the 10% cover within the issues that you started the program with on the real global significance of biodiversity. If we look at what the world has been doing and what we as inhabitants of this precious planet over the last 40 years, we've effectively destroyed 57% of biodiversity. And the projections are that this could reach as much as 68% by the end of this year. And we know how much the forests and the tree cover play in terms of enabling other development activities to unfold. It's not that forests are just important for themselves. As you said, they contribute to alleviating poverty. They create livelihoods. Around 1.5 billion people around the world depend on forests for their livelihoods and forest products. Forests are also a big contributor to pristine waters. Their deforestation creates massive impacts. Now, I want to also commend the government of Kenya for really what we recognize as UNDP and the rest of the UN system, its global sustainable development leadership role. Kenya, and you asked where we are, as if we start from the legal framework and the policy framework, has enshrined sustainable development in its constitution. It's a pillar of its Vision 2030. It's a core development priority within its medium-term plan 3. And recently, last year, with the launch of the 10% tree cover initiative by His Excellency the President, I think this has galvanized a lot of momentum towards achieving this crucial policy. So it's very early days, of course, in terms of implementing this policy, but Kenya has been a global leader as well. Wangari Maathai, we know, has led this Green Belt movement for many years. And so Kenya has really showcased many successful examples of bringing communities into the fore. So let me stop there, but I would really want to engage in this very exciting conversation as the program goes on.
All right, I was actually just about to interject you because you are leading us to the next topic of discussion. You actually have the PS with us, and Dr. Kipto, clearly we still have a long road ahead. We are talking about a tree cover of 7.2% against a projection of 10%. Will we be able to achieve this?
Thank you, Abby. Yes, I think we are optimistic that we will achieve this, given the strategic interventions that we have put in place. Let me start by saying that at the time when our constitution was adopted in 2010, it was estimated that our tree cover was 6.99%. In 2015, when we had our strategic development for the current strategy,
yes,
it was 7.2%. Our experts have estimated that for us to reach 10% tree cover, we need to plant at least 1.8 billion seedlings. And we have rounded it up to 2 billion. So our strategy, therefore, is aimed at ensuring that by 2022, we have that planted. And the cabinet directed us, gave us clear targets, and therefore we are on course to ensure that that is in place. And there are quite a number of interventions that we have put in place, and if you want me to say, I will say.
All right, PS, and let me still stay with you because we're looking at over 12,000 hectares of trees are cut, and this is literally degrading our flora and fauna as a country. Of course, there have been enough efforts by the ministry, but have these efforts paid off?
Yeah, let me start by saying that, you know, the demand for the forest products has been much higher than the supply. I think you heard El Badawi talk about the importance of forests. So we depend on this forest for food, we depend on forests for energy, for products such as building materials, and for biodiversity. But if we are using those products at a rate much faster than the way we are supplying, it becomes a challenge. And I think this is a situation in the case of Kenya. We've seen a lot of pressure of our forests being lost to settlements. We've seen also to other degradation drivers, such as, for instance, you know, the demand for need for agricultural land, for our infrastructure. We want dams, we want roads, we want schools, and these have to be, forests have to give way for this. And so we have been losing the amount of forest that we have. But in the strategy that we have clearly agreed that there are ways we can use to ensure that we still improve the forest cover. So quite a number of intervention measures, starting first with the fact that we need to focus on seeds. And so we are saying we have a target of 1.8 billion seeds. We are therefore working with KEFRI to ensure that those are collected. As we speak now, KEFRI, as Kenya Forest Research Institute, has about 45 metric tons of seed, which Kenyans can buy from the 6 seed centers that we have, the regional centers. We have one in Gedi. We have another one in here in Nairobi, Muguka. We have one in Londiani. We have one in Maseno. We have one in Tarbo. And we are in the process of putting up additional 12 to make 18 seed centers. The idea is to capacity build carefully to give more seeds and focus on quality seedlings and also species matching. Abby, we are focusing on making sure that not just seeds are planted anywhere, they have to be in the right ecological zones. And we are focusing on public forests. As you may be aware, we have, at the time when the forest cover was estimated to be 6.99%,
correct,
the amount of forest cover was about 4.22 hectares, with about 2.6 million being under Kenya Forest Service. So all the land that is managed by Kenya Forest Service, which covers 170 forest blocks, are now being focused as areas to make sure that we plant more. We're focusing also on plantations. We are even in plantations, we are now focusing on bamboo, which is now a new cash crop.
All right.
Yeah. So quite a number of interventions, Abby.
Clearly your work is cut out. Let me bring in Mr. Badawi. And as the UNDP, talk to us about what you have been able to do in terms of boosting partnerships with the government and other actors in the value chain.
Thanks, Avi. Right now, if we look at the environment sector, the environment is one of UNDP's 3 core programmatic pillars for our collaboration and partnership with the government of Kenya and other stakeholders. And currently, we're implementing somewhere in the range of 7 programs amounting to about $30 million or so, thanks to generous contributions from a number of bilateral and multilateral development partners. And let me say that what our support really looks at is how do we help Kenya translate and domesticate global multilateral environmental agreements that the country has entered into the national legal and policy framework. So the Paris Agreement, the Biodiversity Convention, the Nagoya Protocol, amongst so many of these global frameworks, need to be landed in the context of Kenya. So a lot of that support that we've been providing is around doing that. But also we help the country and have helped to mobilize both domestic and international resources to then evolve and implement many of these policy frameworks that have been domesticated. And since we are talking about the tree cover policy, we are currently implementing what we call the REDD+ program. This stands for reducing emissions from deforestation and forest degradation. And what we're doing with this program, which is funded by the World Bank through their Forest Carbon Partnership Facility to the tune of some $4 million, is actually to put in place, and we've started implementing this program 2 years ago, and it's set to continue until next year, to put in place what we would say are the readiness activities for REDD+. This is looking at putting in place a forestry strategy for the country and an investment plan. Speaking of the partnerships that would need to be mobilized, both, as I said, domestic and international. Looking at helping the country establish the forest reference level. We've talked of the 7%, and under the policy we need to reach 10%, and this needs to be tracked over time to make sure that this uphill road that we all have to support the country achieve this is actually benchmarked and monitored. We're looking at building capacity of a whole range of key stakeholders in government, in the forestry community, civil society organizations, the Human Rights Commission, the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission, a whole range of state and non-state actors to build their capacity in the roles that they have to play within the implementation of the forestry program. So the REDD+ is really a key intervention that once we successfully implement that, will open the door for us to work with the government to mobilize much larger resources resources from the Green Climate Fund, the World Bank itself, and other key players to actually then implement this forestry strategy. We're also currently revising the 2016 forestry policy of the country to actually look at injecting and ensuring that the 10% tree cover becomes part of that revised 2016 policy. So there's a lot of work that we're doing right now at the policy level to support that. Of course, on climate change, and we know the role that forests play as carbon sinks in terms of contributing to the country's NDC goals. So we have programs also implemented with the Ministry of Environment and Forestry that actually look at supporting the country to raise its ambition from the current 30% reduction by 2030. And forestry sector will play a key role in this reduction target. So at the policy level, these are things that we're doing, but we're also working at the community level. Through our small grants program funded by the Global Environment Facility, a global vertical fund that is looking at funding environmental programs on the ground. We are implementing a number of community level projects that are intended to promote conservation, but also help communities create livelihoods for themselves in the process. So we create that win-win between conservation and livelihoods. So we're implementing a number of programs as well in that space.
Interesting. Quite a lot happening that, of course, this forum is helping us understand some of the key reforms that have been happening. And still with you, Mr. Badawi, how do we make this trickle down to the communities? It's one thing to have superb programs running. It's another thing to actually see community engagement happening.
I fully agree with you, and actually part of the REDD+ process, and I'll focus on that one because it's quite relevant to the topic today. By design, the REDD+ process requires that communities are engaged throughout the whole process of the development of the strategy and all of the deliverables that go with it. As we speak here today in Taita Taveta, we have been organizing a youth engagement workshop with youth representatives that are working in the forestry sector and the climate sector to actually listen to what they are saying and the ideas that they're putting forward in terms of how do we ensure that the policy creates incentives for financing youth-related activities, agroforestry programs that can contribute to that big challenge that PS Gipto was talking about in terms of the 2.2 billion trees and the seedlings that will go with it. Okay. You know, if we look at it from a challenge point of view, that's daunting. But if you look at it from an opportunity point of view, it's immense. So we are ensuring that communities and stakeholders that are vested in this sector are part and parcel of the decision-making table in the policy that will affect them as it is being implemented. I think that's key to ensure that we have sustainability of any of the programs that we hope to implement successfully.
And you've touched on a very interesting topic around sustainability. And let me bring in PS, Dr. Kipto. As we talk about sustainability, as much as the programs are injecting a new lease of life into the country by growing our tree cover, it's one issue to have trees planted, it's another issue to see them grow to maturity. Do we have a plan around this?
Thank you, Abi. In fact, now at the ministry we are pushing for change of the word tree planting to tree growing, because we believe many a time when we just do tree planting, some we do because we want to be seen to have done it. Mm-hmm. But we want to make sure that what you plant, you are able to see it up to maturity. So this is the focus, and I think in our strategic interventions you will see that where we have planted trees, there's an effort to fence because when you fence, you are able to make sure that at least what you have planted is able to grow without any interference. And there is also natural growth wherever you do any fencing. And we also try to make sure that we educate people to make sure that we take care because it requires really personal initiative to do that. But I think just to come back to what Walid said, I think there is opportunity for a number of Kenyans, and we are looking at this as part of post-COVID measures, that we can have our youth, our women, and those interested in nursery enterprises to register. So soon, the Kenya Forest Service, working with the Kenya Forest Institute, Research Institute, will be issuing a public notice so that those interested in venturing into nursery development can do that. They will be certified, and then once certification is given to them, then in the future, when we are doing tree planting, then our partners, the government and other partners, could then buy from them. Yeah. And I think there is an opportunity there for them to generate income. And at the same time, also, we think that there will be opportunity for jobs to be given. I mean, opportunities for our young people to get jobs in this sector.
All right. And PS, still on this issue of this great initiative for the nursery development, talk to us about how soon is this likely to happen? And at the same time, do you have enough empowerment? Because I'm definitely sure there are different types of species of trees that will be required as opposed to the normal traditional trees that we have out there in the market.
We have tried, first of all, to focus on Kefri as an institution that does the seeds. And efforts have been made to capacity build it, and I'm happy we've seen efforts made to increase the capacity. As I have said, Kefri already now has about 43 metric tons of seeds, and by next year we should be able to have up to 160. That should translate to the number of seedlings that we were talking about. So there will be enough seeds for people to buy and be able to have those nurseries. We have doing a multi-pronged approach. We have, for instance, the Greening Kenya initiative, which is under the Ministry of Interior, working with under our youth service and also the Kenya prisons. That's one. We also have the Greening Schools initiative, which is another one. We hope to use our schools to focus on this. But more importantly is that we want Kenyans to try and venture into this. That's why we have that public notice. We are working with the National Treasury and partners such as UNDP. We also have even World Bank with something called FLOCA, financing locally led actions within counties, so that we are able to raise enough funds to be able to have an uptake. We are partnering with private sector. Already we have discussed with Kenya Breweries. I think we have Safaricom, we have APSA, we have quite a number that have already indicated that they will work with us. So we're working on a fund with our institution called Net Fund to see that we create a kitty that then can be used to uptake whatever is being planted. Of course, we have our own public institutions that will take up seedlings, and so we will be able to generate enough. There is a presidential directive already that all ministries, departments, and agencies should dedicate at least 10% of their CSR budget to tree nursery. So quite a number of initiatives, Abby, and we think that if we have this focus with the national campaign to rally Kenyans to come to do the tree planting, we think that we can rally Kenyans and be able to be countries like India or Pakistan or even Ethiopia that have broken the Guinness Book of Record for being the countries that planted the most number of trees within a short time. We are up on our, we think that we can do this, and we have tested in the past. We've seen that is with enough seedlings, Kenyans are willing and able to actually come and plant the trees.
All right. Of course, PS, we want to go on a quick commercial break, and Mr. Badawi, when we come back, we'll be talking about the culture that has been that of Kenyans when it comes to planting trees. How do we change the culture? We shall be talking about this and much more after this quick commercial break. Don't go too far.
Introduction of various fruit tree seedlings.
Welcome back. You're watching our KTN News special where we are focusing on saving the environment. And we are talking to two key voices in this very interesting forum that we shall be seeking answers on how do we grow the forest cover in the country. Well, gentlemen, just before we take back some of your comments, we'd like to look at a very interesting report that will be sparking some questions into our next round of focus.
A big percentage of the country remains bare, with concerted efforts to revive what was once a home of tree cover in high gear. Introduction of various fruit tree seedlings have been done by different government agencies and county governments, with a top-up on the protection of indigenous trees.
Indeed, the government, led by the Ministry of Environment to this effect, has developed a 10% tree cover strategy to implement the presidential directive. This strategy acknowledges the need for a multi-sector approach toward protecting our existing forests and which remain to be under threat and planting more trees.
It is towards these goals that hundreds of Kenyans over the weekend camped at the Nanapa Conservancy in Isiolo County, most of them driving wild in the wild to protect the country's water towers.
Continuation in fence construction with now 190 kilometers of the Mount Kenya electric fence already being built. And continuation in fence maintenance with over 50 kilometers of the Aberdare electric fence already rehabilitated and upgraded. Innovation with the construction of 2 one-way elephant gates in the Imenti forest, as well as with the design of a wildlife overpass for the Ebuhu Lake Nevasha corridor. And once this one will be built, it will be the first wildlife overpass built in Kenya.
These ecosystems play a very critical role in provision of livelihood to millions of Kenyans and of rural communities that are very vulnerable, and also to help us mitigate against the threats of climate change, and also providing valuable ecological goods and services, including water and energy.
For 31 years now, different government agencies as well as the private sector have partnered, raising in excess of 1.5 billion shillings towards this cause. County governments have also been roped into the project, with Kakamega being the first to take part in the conservation of the Kakamega forest.
I thought of conserving this forest because it's a source of many rivers, and it contributes to a lot of rainfall that we get in Kakamega County.
In the same project, Vihiga County government has also contributed 30 million shillings, with the private sector contributing another 100 million shillings. But even as conservation efforts hit top gear, there remains a huge gap in the planting of more trees, the country's weather conditions and consequently food security remaining of key interests. Ibrahim Karanja, KTN News.
Well, thank you so much, Ibrahim, for that report. And remember, to be part of this conversation, you can join us on KTN News KE, that is our Twitter handle, and you can also share your views on my handle at Agina Abi, and our hashtag is KTN News Special. And gentlemen, that report clearly points to the fact that as much as there is a lot of concerted efforts towards boosting the tree cover, we still have a long way ahead when it comes to the culture, where we don't have enough appreciation of forests, enough appreciation of trees, of people just, when they go up country to plant a tree, when people are on holiday in different parts of the country, to take the initiative to actually plant a tree. And Dr. Kipto, what would be the best approach to this?
Thank you, Abi. In fact, we have insisted now that if it is about infrastructure, we want green infrastructure. So if you are doing any infrastructure, you must make sure that you put in a plan to ensure that you green that infrastructure. Even on the superhighway that you've seen here in Nairobi, we have agreed that some of those trees which have to be cut will not necessarily have to be cut. They will need to be transferred so that we don't have to lose them. And I think there are technologies of doing that. So we have been discussing with our Ministry of Infrastructure, Transport, and clearly we have agreed that on the superhighways, we must make sure that we plant trees. Here in Nairobi, we have worked with the Nairobi Metropolitan City and the county government to ensure that we reclaim and restore green spaces. And you've seen our efforts at Michuki Park, currently at City Park, at the Arboretum. We have at the Ngong Road Forest. We have also the Ngong Hills. Even within town, we are reclaiming even areas like Jivanji Gardens and Huri Gardens and others. We have worked with the UN Habitat, and they have helped us to map up to 800 green spaces in Nairobi. This is also in our strategy that across every town in Kenya, those green spaces must be provided. And these have already been embedded in law. It is in Environmental Management and Coordination Act, under NEMA, and also in the Kenya Forest Conservation and Management Act. So we hope that this will be part of the initiatives. In Mombasa, we go for mangroves, and we are focusing on that, focusing also on asal areas, and working with the Ministry of Agriculture to focus on agroforestry. So it's a multiple approach that we are focusing on, but ensuring that we not only plant trees, but we ensure that we conserve. So this is why we would like the public to support. And that is why we have also a component on awareness, education and awareness, to ensure that people appreciate so that they take care. And I think we've seen a lot of Kenyans of late really very keen to ensure that we avoid a further degradation of our forests. So,
all right.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, PS. And Mr. Badawi, I could see you smiling as I asked that question. I'd like to get your quick reactions.
Thanks, Abi. I think, what is really needed is actually behavioral science. Culture change is context specific. It's very, you cannot generalize a policy without really a much deeper analysis of what is triggering certain behaviors. And if you look at development literature now, it's quite rife with discussions around how to use behavioral science to predict certain behavior certainly, but actions that will follow. And for us as UNDP, actually recognizing that this is so crucial, we've launched what we call our accelerator labs, and Kenya happens to be one of 60 countries around the world that has benefited from the investment made by UNDP to create these accelerator labs that are staffed with young, dynamic people that have certain profiles. And what they do is actually try and look at mining indigenous solutions to different development problems. Our lab here in Kenya is actually focusing on youth unemployment. And through the lab, we test different hypotheses. We gather evidence using very unconventional means to test out whether a certain policy is likely to create the intended objectives, or are there other drivers and incentives that are not built into the system to actually achieve that goal. So I think to your question, behavioral science is a key area of thinking that we all need to be injecting more of. And I think if we look at what these can do, you'll see that rather than looking at the stick approach to penalizing people for burning down trees or chopping down trees because of their requirements, we need to look at a more empathetic approach, understand why this is happening, provide alternatives, and start questioning whether the alternatives that are being provided are actually creating the intended outcomes or not. So I think a combination of behavioral science, certainly awareness raising, but let's not stop at awareness raising. We need to go beyond that and actually start changing the incentives to actually create that behavior change. A good example is the whole circular economy and waste. And we've seen what Kenya has done in terms of the plastic ban. And this has created so many small business opportunities for gathering the plastic and then for using it for other means. So those types of reversing and changing the incentive systems to create innovations that can change things is where I think we need to go.
All right. Thank you so much, Mr. Badawi. And we are getting quite a flow of comments and questions from viewers. There's an observation here. Dr. Isaac Kalua is saying, thank you for the conversation, a very valuable contribution the two gentlemen are making. Kipto has my vote based on his previous record. He is reliable and deserves support. We have a question here. Someone is asking, there are currently 88 water towers as indicated in a previous report, and there used to be 5 before. What is the process of gazettement and how many can we say we have today? And then there's also another question here from a viewer directed to Mr. Badawi around soil erosion and management of such soil is a big challenge for Africa. Are there opportunities for us to get support and innovation through this? Perhaps, Dr. Kipto, you can go first.
Yeah, I think before I answer the issue of the number of water towers, I just want to add to the fact that we have a number of interventions also we are using to make sure that we change the behavior to ensure that people also support. For instance, we have something called environmental soldiers program that our KDF has embraced. That one soldier has a target of at least planting 100 trees per year. And this has been very successful. And we really echo the KDF for that. We also have seen the adopt a forest block. A few institutions have been able to adopt forests and have been successful. But more importantly is the need for us to move to the circular economy and adopting measures such as biogas and others to make sure that we reduce the need for firewood, because this has been the main driver. A lot of our people, 80% of our people live in rural areas, and they have to rely on firewood for their survival. And unless we provide other alternatives to that, it would be a problem. So we are looking at schools, for instance, where we have boarding schools. we need to ensure we invest in waste management, where in all schools, because of the population they have, they generate a lot of waste. That waste can be used so that no school or public institution should be using firewood. Instead, they should be able to invest in technologies such as biogas. The impact of that alone will be very huge, because there will be a reduction in demand. Because I think we need to see tree planting not necessarily as adding more and planting more, but reducing the number of those that have to be cut. Yeah. And so these are the focus areas. And also focusing on our water tower. In the approach that we have now, we have asked the Kenya Water Tower to map the entire water towers and make sure that we restore them. And water towers do not just cover our gazetted forest. It means also in riparian places, in our own lands, and we make sure that we protect those riparian areas. To answer that question that was asked, we have about 18 water towers, but not all of them are gazetted. We have, of course, the major ones like the Mau, the Abadeas, the Mount Kenya, the Cherangani, and of course the Mount Elgon. But we have a few others. I may not have offered the number. The process of gazettement is provided for also in law, because there must be public consultation. There is no gazettement of a public forest or a water tower without going through due process. So Wananchi will have to be asked, consulted, and then they will, on the basis of that consultation, the gazettement is done. So this approach of forest cover that we have is to look at water towers, gazetted public forests, we look at public land, private land, indeed everywhere, including ASAL, so that we achieve. I just want to tell Kenyans that this 10% that we keep talking about is much lower compared to what we see internationally. The average for Africa, the average forest cover for Africa is around 21%. There are countries like Gabon that have 90%, countries like DRC that have 60%. In Europe, we have the whole of European Union having an average of 38%, with a country like Finland having almost 72%. US is around 35. You look at South America, much higher. And China has around 22%. So our 10% is much lower. We don't want to be at that. The constitutional target was only meant to take us from the low level to 10, but we want to go above that. Nothing stops us from going above that.
All right.
Yes.
Thank you. And gentlemen, our time is far much spent. We need to take this conversation to a close. Mr. Badawi, if you could just make your quick comments and also talk to us about the elephant in the room. Of course, we've seen the demand for wood products rising in Africa. And what are some of the strategic interventions that can turn this around, especially in an economy where 80%, as Dr. Kipto says, live in rural areas, and the affordability of liquid petroleum gas and, of course, kerosene are some of the barriers to this. How do we tilt the scale?
I think let's acknowledge also that Kenya has really done well. If you look at, for example, energy, Kenya's energy grid is generated 87% through renewable sources. I think a similar approach that the country has taken through a strong policy directive to change things, and I think the 10% tree cover right now as a policy that the government is firmly committed to, and we're firmly behind, will provide actually those types of alternatives, generate more sustainable use of wood and other resources that can generate the economic returns that communities will require. So I think innovation, I think changing the incentive systems, I think bringing in the private sector much more to invest through new financing instruments that actually benefit the young entrepreneurs, that actually can then become much more engaged in the economy without having to rely on the destruction of the forests. And just on the issue of the soil erosion, you know, again, the solution lies in really putting our weight behind this 10% tree cover program, because the degradation of land, the mudslides, all of the things that we see as a result of deforestation could be averted if we invest properly and align behind this 10% policy.
All right. Thank you so much, Mr. Badawi. And Dr. Kipto, take us with your closing remarks as we bring this conversation to a close.
Yeah, Kenya is a net importer of forest products at the moment. Our consumption is much higher than what we produce, so we have to rely on imports from Tanzania, from DRC, from Malawi, from South Sudan, and other places, even as far as China. I have seen toothpicks in our supermarkets, and these are products that we have capacity to generate. That's why we are focusing now on bamboo. We think bamboo is the place to go. We thank the cabinet. The cabinet has already asked us that we proceed in that direction, has even allowed us to import seeds. So I encourage Kenyans to move in that direction, because we can be able to do self-sufficiency and reverse the process to be a net exporter. And so our target of 2 billion is just for 10%, but we can actually target that every year and be able to succeed. That is why we are planning now for next year. As in Kenyans, we rally, we come together when we call out, so that you turn up in large numbers for the tree planting. We think that 35 billion Kenyans, each one of us planting 60 seedlings, whether in one single day or at least within a certain time in a year, we can achieve the 2 billion, and we could do that continuously. It is not impossible. So I rally Kenyans to really support this process. We have the leadership of the ministry, led by our minister, our president, and the rest of our partners, who are very keen to ensure that we achieve and we make progress in this front. All so right. Welcome for all Kenyans. I welcome them to support this initiative. And thanks Badawi, thanks to others like WWF and the European Union, the UK, and others who have demonstrated support to this initiative. We think we now have enough support to be able to achieve good progress in this front. Thank you, Abby.
Thank you so much, Dr. Chris Kipto, PS for Environment and Forestry. And also, we had the honor to have Mr. Walid Badawi from the United Nations Development Program, giving us his perspectives into this very critical discussion. And I leave you with the famous quotes of the late professor, and that is, "The generation that destroys the environment is not the generation that pays the price. That is the problem." Those are the words of the late Nobel Peace Laureate winner, Wangari Maathai. And at that juncture, that's why we wrap it up here on our KTN News Special. We appreciate your questions, the avalanche of feedback that we have received, and I want to guarantee you that my two guests will be online to be able to respond to most of your questions, if not all. Well, my name is Abi Agina. On behalf of the team that made this program a success, we say a big thank you. See you next time. Keep it locked here on KTN News, where you get the whole story.